America-China feud has begun. When did it started? And where will it lead? The hell has broken loose and a geopolitical feud has emerged between America and China that will shape the background of the next coming decades. Sun Tzu, one of China's greatest strategic masters, once advised, if you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. If you know yourself but not the enemy, for every victory gained you will also suffer a defeat. If you know neither the enemy nor yourself, you will succumb in every battle. So, does America know its Chinese rival? Is it prepared for a long-term war? Did it still have the stamina to overcome this cockfight? Nobody knows for sure, but everyone can guess extrapolating on scattered clues all around the geopolitical scene. The Trump administration had put on tracks the seeds of this near-war process, and all the clues are that this will outlast his electoral terms. One major decision since his election was the sparkling of his trade and technological war against China. Indeed, he has received strong bipartisan support for it, and a strong consensus depicting China as the main new threat to America. Even George Soros, who spent millions trying to prevent Trump from being elected, has praised Trump on China. He has said, the greatest and perhaps only foreign policy accomplishment of the Trump administration has been the development of a coherent and genuinely bipartisan policy toward China. It was right for the Trump administration to declare China a strategic rival. The greatest and perhaps only foreign policy accomplishment of the Trump administration has been the development of a coherent and genuinely bipartisan policy toward China. It was right for the Trump administration to declare China a strategic rival. This unconditional and enthusiastic political domestic supported to Trump's views, is just short-termism reaction, not backed up with any tangible comprehensive and global strategy to deal with China. If America thought hard and deep before it plunged into the Cold War against the Soviet Union. Thus, the strategic plans formulated ensured America's successful containment strategy against the Soviet Union during the Cold War era, or still trying to work out a comprehensive strategy to match the level of menace perceived to the resurgence of China. The American strategists are now on a new era of global struggle against new emerging power after the end of the bipolar schism between Eastern and Western homogeneous blocs, and facing a more diffuse emerging challengers dragons, led by China. So the word is to thinking the unthinkable and do the undoable, raising many questions and initiating paths of thoughts on policy planning that would favor confronting head-on the toughest issues that lies ahead. Many questions and concerns arise, that should be highlighted and answered to properly dissect and understand the many complex dimensions of the US-China geopolitical contest that will unravel in the coming decade. It's obvious for any beginner in economy to see clearly that America's GDP will become smaller than China's in the next 30 years. It's not a random assumption, because it's also crystal clear that America is no longer the world's unchallenged dominant economic power, as it was perceived till the end of the 2K century. How America is going to balance its two primary goals, to improve the livelihood of its 330 million citizens or to preserve its primacy in the international system. This dilemma leads to contradictions between the goals of preserving primacy and improving well-being, which should take priority. The answer will induce a political changes even before considering its economic aspects. Historically, America's share of the global GDP was close to 50% at the end of World War II. Even throughout the Cold War, the GDP of the Soviet Union never came close in size to that of America, reaching only 40% that of America's at its peak. Therefore, during the Cold War era, America's heavy defense expenditures proved prudent as they forced the Soviet Union, a country with a smaller economy, to match America's military expenses. In the end, this helped to bankrupt the Soviet Union. But the rules of the game have changed and tables are turning very fast. The economic supremacy is lost and China learned a lesson from the collapse of the Soviet Union. It is restraining its defense expenditures while focusing on economic development. So, as expected, new dilemmas arises. Is it wise for America to continue investing heavily in its defense budget? Or should it cut down its defense expenses and its involvement in expensive foreign wars and instead invest more in improving social services and rejuvenating national infrastructure? Does China want America to increase or reduce its defense expenditures? Described this as American soft power, that soared till the 1980s, this policy developed as a strategy against the Soviet Union, was vital for America to broadcast among the peoples of the world generally the impression of a country that was successful domestically and enjoyed a spiritual and societal vitality. Unfortunately, since 9/11's events, as America went on warpath, hence driven to violating international law and international human rights conventions, the once upon a time praised American soft power has declined considerably, especially under recent years' policy. So the ultimate question is, can America win the ideological battle against China if it is perceived to be a normal nation rather than an exceptional one? To the fundamental question, can America lose? The thought seems inconceivable to American thinkers. In fact, even facing all the pros and cons and the scale of risks involved in this major geopolitical contest, both in physical and moral terms, America has long seen itself as the strongest nation. The American economy, and consequently its military, has been, for half a century since World War II, the strongest in the world for over a century. Its natural advantage of occupying a lightly populated and resource-rich continent, combined with the innovativeness and vigor of American institutions, especially its free markets, its rule of law, and its universities, and the American people, have convinced America that no nation can come close to its level of ingenuity and productivity. On a mass psychology level, to most Americans, the idea that a free and open society like America, the world's strongest democracy, could lose a contest against a closed communist society like China is inconceivable. Americans are prone to believe that good always triumphs over evil and that no political system is inherently as good as the one envisaged by the founders of the Republic. This may partially explain the increasing demonization of China in recent years. The more China is portrayed as an evil actor, the easier it has become for Americans to persist in the belief that they would eventually triumph against China, no matter the odds. Also on this ideological topic, for many politics, the struggle between America and China represented the struggle between free and open societies and closed authoritarian systems. If this statement is correct, all free and open societies should feel equally threatened by the Chinese Communist Party. However, no Asian or European nation democracies feel threatened in any way by Chinese ideology. By treating the new China challenge as akin to the old Soviet strategy, America is making the classic strategic mistake of fighting tomorrow's war with yesterday's strategies. As a consequence, American strategic thinkers must rise up to developing new analytical frameworks to capture the essence of the competition with China, different from those elaborated during the ideological arm wrestling with former USSR. Notwithstanding, it is reminded that America did not win the Cold War on its own. It formed solid alliances with its Western partners in NATO and cultivated key Third World friends and allies like China, Pakistan, Indonesia, and Egypt. To preserve these close alliances, America kept its economy open to its allies and generously extended its aid. Above everything else, America was known for its spirit of generosity in the Cold War. So, if now, on this harsh economic times, America chooses to ignore its former global coalition and alienates its key allies, by imposing tariffs on key allies like the EU, Japan, and India, it has no chance to counterbalance China's emerging ascension. For example, it's legit to wonder if America's decision to walk away from the Trans-Pacific Partnership, TPP, was a geopolitical gift to China? Because China already mounted a preemptive strike against a containment policy by engaging in new economic partnerships with its neighbors through the Belt and Road Initiative, BRI. For decades, the US dollar has become virtually indispensable for global trade and financial transactions. It was the most powerful weapon that America can use to bring its allies and adversaries into line and conform to its wishes. It served as a global public good servicing the interdependent global economy. Since foreign banks and institutions cannot avoid using it, America has been able to indulge in extraterritorial application of its domestic laws and impose huge fines on foreign banks for violating its domestic laws on trading with any of the sanctioned countries. American sanctions on these countries worked best when they were supported and endorsed by multilateral institutions, like the UN Security Council, whose decisions are binding on UN member states. Under the present administration, America has switched from multilateral to unilateral sanctions and weaponized the dollar to use against its adversaries. Cracks on the building are appearing, and if right now, there are no practical alternatives to the US dollar, that will not always be the case. Dollar hegemony can't be eternal, and this Achilles heel in the American economy can be pierced. And when the weakening crack will be revealed, all the edifice will shatter and scatter, and countries, likewise China, will be on the lookout. For example, is America making a fundamental error of perception when it views the Chinese Communist Party as a Chinese Communist Party? This would imply that the soul of the CCP is embedded in its communist roots and has long harbored a deep, unconscious fear of the yellow peril. Yet, in the eyes of many objective Asian observers, the CCP actually functions as the Chinese Civilization Party. Its soul is not rooted in the foreign ideology of Marxism-Leninism but in the Chinese civilization. The most important job for a strategic thinker is to try to step into the mind of the adversary. So here's a test: what percentage of a Chinese leader's mind is preoccupied with Marxist-Leninist ideology, and what percentage with the rich history of Chinese civilization? The answer would probably surprise many Americans. To be continued. All the ideas discussed in this podcast may be found in the book Has China Won? By Kishore Mahbubani.